All right, good morning and thank you for being here with us today to try in an attempt to remain coherent. I've got some scripted notes, so bear with me on that. The information we're sharing with you here today is literally hot off the presses. We received the necessary materials supporting what you'll be seeing here today from our outsourced bookkeeping service, eCratchit, just a few days ago this week. As such, it is preliminary and subject to some minor changes. So for some of you, this may be your first annual meeting, and for others, it may be one of a dozen or more. Hopefully, I will provide enough context for the former and not too much for the latter. So first, we want to take a look at the economic context that affected all of us here in 2022. Take a look at our endowment and where that stands, financial results for the year, our draft budget for 2023, which at this point remains a draft budget. And in large part, that's because we don't like where it stands right now. A quick update on our Inspired by Love campaign, the capital expenditures that we've made in 2022, anticipate making for 2023, many of which you can see around the campus. And then finally, looking ahead, what's on our mind, what's on our to-do list for 2023. Okay, first, economic context. So here is a proxy for the roughly 2/3 of our investment portfolio, our endowment that's invested in equities. I've got a chart of the S&P stock index for the past 3 decades. Okay, in this plot, the y-axis, the up and down direction, it's a logarithmic plot. So equal distances in the vertical direction equate to equal percentage moves. And the slope of any given line is its proportionate rate of growth. I've drawn a somewhat arbitrary line with a 7% slope that you see here. And so that rate of appreciation in share prices plus an annual dividend rate of say 2 or 3% combines to make a total rate of return of 9 or 10%. And that has been typical for US equities in the long run over the last several decades that we see here. There's a lot of history contained here as well. For example, you can see the rapid rate of growth of the .com bubble right here. The brutal sell-off of the housing and credit crisis of 08-09. The short, sharp, yet brief COVID sell-off, top to bottom, that was about 20% or more. Yeah, and the subsequent recovery in equity prices brought on by the Federal Reserve and dropping interest rates to nearly zero and doubling down on quantitative easing. And finally, most relevant to what we're talking about today, this bear market of the last year. Where peak to trough equities, US equities fell off by almost 25% on the year. Sorry, much better with a mouse. Okay, next chart, we're taking a look at interest rates over the that same period, the last 3 decades. Here I plotted the Fed funds target rate, which is the step function in dark blue, and also the rate of return, the yield on the 10-year US Treasury note. So note overall, we've had a 3-decade bull market with interest rates declining from around 9% to the incredible low of essentially zero of 2021. And then again, most relevant to what we've experienced most recently, one of the most rapid rates of increase that started just at the beginning of this past year. Okay. So in 2022, we experienced a double whammy of bear markets in both stocks and bonds. And needless to say, that was not a good year for our endowment. We are, of course, in it for the long haul, and valuations will recover. That first graph is clear evidence of that. Over time, equities rise. In the meantime, the good news is that we're adding funds donated by the Inspired by Love campaign to our endowment. and are therefore making purchases of both stocks and bonds at discounted prices. Okay, so here's where we stand on our endowment at this point. Just recall that there are two components that make up our total endowment. About 80% of it is held in the donations and bequests fund of the Episcopal Church in Connecticut, which is managed by the Bank of America. And the other 20% is in our share of the Lancaster Trust Fund, which is managed by Deutsche Bank. We have control of the donations and bequests, or D&B fund, insofar as we may choose our investment manager, but we are passive beneficiaries of the Lancaster Trust. In either case, our investments are completely outsourced to managers. We can see from the pie chart here that we are overall currently invested in roughly 2/3 of our portfolios in equities and just over a quarter in fixed income instruments. Overall, this is a fairly conservative orientation, with the D&B portion of the endowment the more conservative of the two components of our overall endowment. Our endowment at the end of the year of 2022 stood at just about 8 million, net little changed over 2021. That, despite D&B experiencing and reporting a loss of 13.6% for 2022. The difference, of course, was made up by funds that were added thanks to the Inspired by Love campaign. I don't have rates of return at this time on the Lancaster Trust. They're not on this chart, but when they're available, I will update the chart. Okay, in this slide, I wanted to give you a sense of how funds received by the Inspired by Love campaign have been added into the endowment over 2022. Okay, so in the second column, I have the amounts that were added and the dates at which those ads were made as a proxy for where the equity portion of our investments were. I've just put in here the S&P 500 as a proxy and where it was just in price change on the year at those points. Okay, so we started down here at the bottom. You can see we started at 6.24 million in the D&B portion of the endowment. We added 1.46 million thanks to Inspired by Love campaign. Our draw, which goes to help fund our operations, we took out 266,000 over the year, and we ended with 6.49 million, implying just a backed out figure, not an accounting figure, of just under $1 million in loss due to the bear market. So the good news here is all of these purchases, for the most part, are being made at, actually all, are being made at lower prices. And in fact, this 105,000 that went into the endowment on October 11th, with the S&P 500 down almost 25% on the year, the actual low for the year, intraday low, was made 2 days later on October 13th. Okay, so prices will recover. We're averaging down by putting these funds into the endowment, and that is indeed good news. Okay, on this slide, I just want to emphasize that point and show how prescient the architects of the Inspired by Love campaign were. Our annual draw from the endowment is calculated by a percentage. For the last couple of years, that percentage has been 5%. That gets applied to the funds held in the endowment, but priced at the average share price of the preceding 12 quarters. So, for example, the calculation that was just made in October to determine our draw for 2023, which is what we see down here, that amount from D&B portion is 339,000, was calculated using these 12 prices applied to the number of shares we held at that point. So as soon as the monies go into the endowment from the Inspired by Love campaign, they are instantly effective at increasing our ability to draw money from the endowment into our reserve. So here I've just arbitrarily put out two paths for the D&B share price going forward. The red is a 5% rate of return, and the green is 15%. and then calculated at each year, each October, what those average 12 preceding quarter share prices will be, generating what we see down here, which is our draw from the D&B portion. So by 2026, just taking the average of this mid-range, our draw versus 2023 of 339,000 will have increased by 203,000 to a level, using the midpoint here, of $542,000 a year. So these guys were geniuses who put this together. This is exactly what they were attempting to accomplish. It takes time, as you've heard already, to get to that point. But by getting to that point, we will alleviate stress on our operations by filling the revenue void that we have now, thanks to the bolstered and right-sized endowment. Okay, just quickly on this slide. The vast majority of our funding, of course, comes from pledges, almost 70%. The pie chart here. We see also that our total revenue in the bar chart here, 2019 on, including 2023 budget, is fairly static. And that for 2023, our budgeted revenue figure is actually a decline over 2022. This is our revenue side. You can imagine what's happening to our expenses. Which is here. Again, the majority of our expenses go to compensation for our staff. We're a people business. And we see that our expenses currently in the draft budget, we're tightening as tight as we can get to keep this essentially unchanged on the year. We also see in 2022 that we had an increase due to, as Stan mentioned, we had an overdue salary increase for our staff. Okay, so here we go with income and expenses and operating results for 2022 in light of recent years. Okay, note at this time that for 2022, our bottom line deficit is roughly 36,000. And that is after benefit here of our new clergy gift fund of 156,000 that we're using for 2022. Okay. That gift has now been fully depleted. So we see its absence in 2023 budget. And as it stands now, our deficit for 2023 is 26,000. Now you've heard earlier 200,000 reference to that and to 250,000. The 200,000 is because right now this pledge gift and plate figure of 1.733 million is aspirational. It's where we think we need to get to and can get to, but we're nervous. And right now we're 200 shy of that figure. Father Peter mentioned 250,000 because this figure of 1.733 is already a reduction from where it had stood earlier, which was at 1.50,000 higher than this. And you can see overall that pledge gift and plate over the last 4 years is relatively static, give or take. Okay, we're concerned, as I mentioned, about this revenue figure, but this deficit, should we make that figure of 26,000 for the current budget draft for 23, is after some fairly draconian expense reductions. You can see all other expenses for 2022 at 922,000. We're currently budgeting 837,000 for 2023. That's an $85,000 decrease. So I'm concerned that this number is attainable. So some examples of cost savings that go into this $836,000 figure. And we're trying to make savings without cutting into muscle, as Father Peter likes to say. So we're not going to make Advent wreaths in December of 2023. That's out. We've reduced our flower budget. We will eliminate some mailings in communicating with our parishioners. We will manage our thermostat with an eye toward thrift. And it's not as easy as it sounds because our thermostat system is in need of modernization. Our professional budget has been slashed. We've had to say no to Ned's incredible program when he's wanted to add paid singers. So these are just a few. Okay, other quick points to note. That the vestry granted a 6% raise in 2022, which is in aggregate to our staff, which is why compensation and benefits increased in 22. For 2023, as it stands now, we have a 3% salary increase in this budgeted figure, which is less than the headline inflation rate of 6.5% for 2022. So as you all know from your own experience, St. Mark's has suffered from the stresses of inflation. One example, we paid 60% more for heating oil in 2022 than we did in 2021. We're big consumers of oil, tens of thousands of gallons. And so that increase added approximately $24,000 to our expenses in 22 over 21. So, and finally, as we've seen here and spoken about earlier, we see the benefits of the Inspired by Love campaign and how it's increased our draw. So for 2023, we've got 72,000 more in endowment and trust draw than we had in 2022. And as we saw earlier, that amount will increase even more in the future. Okay, hopefully quickly, a summary of the Inspired by Love campaign as it stands. What an amazing accomplishment, 7.5 million. I mean, that is incredible. Somebody deserves a medal for that. To date, we've received roughly 43% of that amount that has been pledged, 3.2 million. As you recall, hopefully, the vestry has designated that in total, 2/3 of the IBL campaign funds will go toward our endowment, with the remaining 1/3 being designated for capital expenditures. All right, some of those expenditures that have been made in 2022, the big kahuna is improvements to the HVAC system in our administrative building, Grey Gables. The cooling part was accomplished first. I haven't sat in there in the summer, but I'm assuming it's nice and cool. You will have noticed that we've carpeted the halls here in Morrill Hall, and preschool paid for half of that. So that's a fantastic synergy. And then other work, as you see here. The total for the year, $954,000. The vestry had approved just over $1 million, as you see here. For 2023, expenses, capital expenditures that we anticipate making, the completion of the Grey Gables HVAC, which is the heating portion. As you've seen, the Veritas restoration is underway. Media ministry is a very exciting area for us going forward, and more here. So I'm not sure whether it takes a village or it takes an army, but the folks who support the financial component of our church are just amazing. No surprise to any of you. There isn't one meeting or simple one-on-one exchange with someone where I don't come away feeling just how blessed we are to have so many talented people committed to doing good in this world and for our church in particular. So thank you to everyone listed here, and I'm sure there are more. So finally, what's on our mind for 2023? So there is the potential for one more round of federal relief through the employee retention credit of the CARES Act. We are working on that. We are hopeful, if not optimistic. But it may take the better part of the year before we receive any monetary benefit from this. So I've started making connections with other treasurers in the area, thinking, wow, can't we all benefit from how our peers at other churches are handling the challenges that face us? It's a work in progress, but the very first meeting I had was fantastic and came away with so many excellent points. We look to add members to our finance committee. We continue to explore enhancements to our bill payment process. It's not as simple as it may sound, but that's something we continue to work on. And with the increase in interest rates, we're doing everything we can to maximize revenues for the church by putting excess monies in our account into T-bills. And so far that is working out well. That's all I have. If anyone has any questions for now or for later, please let me know.
Thanks, Nancy. Oh, can you just, what's the clergy gift? That was one of the line items here. That's that.
So that was the amount that was mentioned earlier of in total 350,000. That.
What is that? What is that?
So that's the two families that stepped forward to basically fund the addition of Justin and Elizabeth. Right, so the last piece of it, 156,000 here was the last remaining amount. And the federal relief of PPP in 2020 and 2021 enabled us not to make that draw. Right, so as Father Peter has said, that 350,000 lasted way longer than we thought it would. So we're really blessed to have that. All right, thank you, everybody.